Hello and welcome to Read All About It, the podcast where people talk about their favourite and not so favourite books. Join me, Paul Cuddihy, as I take each guest on the literary journey of their life, from their most cherished childhood read and a book they'd recommend to anyone, to the book they couldn't be paid to read again, and much more in between. So listen, enjoy, subscribe and spread the word about the Read All About It podcast. My guest on this podcast is Dani Garavelli, who is an award-winning journalist and columnist. The most recent of those awards coming in December at the Right to End Violence Against Women Awards for the Best Opinion and Comment Piece of 2019. She's the 2019 Scottish Press Awards Feature Writer of the Year, while she was also the winner of the inaugural Nicola Barry Award, established by Women in Journalism Scotland in memory of the award-winning writer, to encourage and recognise powerful reporting and campaigning journalism. Dani's Twitter profile also declares her to be a gin drinker, a night owl and book lover, and in agreeing to take part in the Read All About It podcast, she told me that books are one of the few things I am happy to talk about. Shutting me up is probably the most difficult part. Dani, welcome to the Read All About It podcast.
Thank you for asking me.
And hosting the podcast, when you say books are one of the few things you're happy to talk about, I mean I'm absolutely delighted about that, since this is all about books.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved books, so I think it's great to evangelise about them. I think one of the brilliant things about social media has been being able to open up the kind of conversation about books and share things that you love with other people. So,
and I'm guessing, obviously, it's a writer that you've forged your career and made your name, but that love of writing, I'm guessing, would have started with a love of reading.
Yeah, I loved reading long before I ever thought about writing. I loved reading. My mum's a huge reader. And so she read to me when I was very small, but also my image of her is always of reading and going to the library. Went to the library all the time to pick up books, and the smell of the library still stays with me, So I read absolutely all the time when I was small. And yes, that has stayed with me, although obviously life gets in the way, unfortunately, sometimes, and you don't read as much as you'd like to.
And I was wondering as well, have you ever, given the fact that you've always been a reader, have you ever wanted to write your own books? Have you ever thought about that, or have you ever tried it?
I haven't tried it. I have thought about it. I don't think that I'd write fiction. I love reading fiction, but I think I don't particularly have any strong ideas about fiction. I think if I was doing something, if I ever did write a book, it would be something non-fiction, essays or something, covering some bigger story in a more extended fashion, if you see what I mean. But yeah, I mean, it's the dream for everyone, isn't it? I think that loves reading, just to write their own.
And also, I'm also aware, whenever I've asked anybody these questions, it's the same 5 questions. But then people, particularly if you do love books, then you start to agonise over your choices, and then it's difficult to whittle it down, because, and I've said to people before, in any given day, if we were to do this podcast in a few days' time, you might have 5 completely different books, and I suppose that's the beauty of books as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was a bit worried when I picked especially my childhood ones, that somebody would come back to me and said, but in the past you've said such and such was your favourite childhood book, because it does change depending, and there were so many of them at different stages of childhood. So yeah, I do think what your favourite book is depends on what your mood is at the time, and it's it's conceit, isn't it, whittling it down to one. There are so many ones that you've loved during your life.
And the first question I'll always ask people is the favourite book from childhood, and we're kind of going to go sort of 2019 Booker Prize here, but we're going to split it, the award, between 2 books, because I know you asked me, and obviously it's if you can't choose one, it's fine to choose 2. There was 2 books in particular that you chose. It was Carrie's War by Nina Bodden and Marianne Dreams by Catherine Storr.
Yes, I mean I got it down to 10 and at some point the date night before you asked me to finalise it. So shall I start with Carrie's War then? Yeah.
Yep.
So Carrie's War, I absolutely adored when I was young. I was quite fixated on it, and it's about these 2, a brother and sister who were evacuated during the war. It's fictional, and that's quite a common theme, obviously, but what makes this different is that they go to this a tiny Welsh village, and I think that was kind of exotic to me, the idea that they had wonderful names, like Druid's Bottom was the place where one of them stayed, and one of the characters is called Hepzibah Green, and so there were names and places that were completely unfamiliar to me. But it's also interesting because it's quite insular and dark, because when they go there, it's not all the fun of being evacuated. There's quite a lot of darkness in it, and it centres on, in this place called Druid's Bottom, there's this mysterious skull, and there's a curse around it. She's told that there's a curse. Carrie, the main character, is told that there's a curse, and if the skull ever leaves Druid's Bottom, something terrible will happen. So it's very complicated, but there's an argument and she's angry and she throws the skull down a well. And honestly, I can still remember how I felt when she throws the skull down the well. And then at the end, as they move somewhere else, they leave and they see Druid's Bottom's on fire. And for most of the rest of her life, she thinks she's responsible for burning down Druid's Bottom. And I think that idea that you could do something irrevocable, that you'd never be forgiven for, just almost in a fit of pique or almost inadvertently, it's just kind of hit home with me when I was a child, so definitely.
And what age would you have been when you first read that?
Less than 10, 8, 9 maybe, something like that. Yeah.
Because I always wonder if you've gone back and revisited it as at various stages of your life and to see whether it still has the same impact on you.
Yeah, well, I read it to my kids, and one of the great sadnesses for me is for none of my kids liked it. None of them thought it was nearly as exciting. It was absolutely devastating, and I began to learn as I read to my kids not to invest too much in it because they quite often didn't like. I suppose things date, and they said not much happened in it, but I thought that moment of that recognition of what you'd done was like so powerful that it just obviously didn't translate to them.
I suppose it's that idea of, like sometimes you'll recommend a book to someone, particularly a book that you really love, and I'm quite guilty of almost judging people if they come back to me and saying, "Man, I didn't really like it," and I'm thinking, why not?
Yes, you just want to like keep talking to them until they change their minds, wear them down until they've changed their minds.
I suppose the other side of that is, do you ever feel, if somebody says to you, "You should really read this, I love the book," there's a pressure on you then for the same reason? If you read a book and somebody else tells you it had such an impact and you read it and it doesn't have the same impact on you, and you don't want to tell someone because they disappoint them.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't tell them, to be honest. I'd probably lie. But I think mostly if people have, you know people's tastes before if you talk about books a lot before you, and so if it was somebody whose taste I normally liked, I would go the extra mile to try and see what they'd seen in it. I think probably, try and understand what it was they got out of it.
And I think people as well, some people might recognise the name of the book because there was a TV series in particular that I think people watched it. Maybe I don't know if it was maybe
there was a series. Yeah. I mean, I don't really remember the series that well, but there definitely was a series afterwards. Yes, people. I mean, I think it was pretty well known at the time, wasn't it? I think it got I think it didn't get any awards at the time, and then it subsequently got a Phoenix Award for being recognised as a book that had been overlooked at the time, and was actually much more important or a greater quality than had been appreciated.
Now, I mentioned that you'd already broken the rules of the podcast, so everything's up there, but the other book that you had chosen was Marianne Dreams by Catherine Storm. What was it about that book?
Well, that book has a much vaguer thing in my mind, but it's the atmosphere of it. It just, I would dream about it. So she was an invalid. This wee girl, Marianne, she's an invalid, and she draws in her bed because she's not allowed out. So there's this feeling of claustrophobia about it. And when she draws, what she draws comes real in her dream. So she draws a house, and then she draws a picture of a little boy in it, and the boy is a real boy, but she never meets him except in her dream. He's also an invalid somewhere else. But every time she gets angry, so she gets angry at the boy in the dream, and then the next day she draws bars over his window, and the thing I remember most is boulders with sinister eyes in it so that they watch, but she can't rub it out, so that's there forever. But it was more the quality of darkness. It's kind of had a gothic feel to it, and I think I was very young when I read that, and so I found it quite scary, and that kind of stayed with me.
Were you, when you were younger, were you a regular visitor to the library, for example? Or were there books in the house all the time? Obviously, you mentioned your mum was a big reader.
Well, we were at the library all the time, but also I was allowed. So we got pocket money, but it was only book money. So we were only allowed to spend it on books. So we got 10 pence a week, as I remember. And at that time, it took 4 weeks to be able to buy a book. So there was also the trip to the bookshop, the ritual thing of having saved those 10 pences for the 4 weeks, and then you would go and buy. So I did own quite a lot of books as well. I was very lucky like that. But we did go to the library too.
Because I'm always curious, and I've spoke to people before about this, about, I grew up in a house full of books. I grew up with this love of reading, and again, like you, I read to my kids when they were wee, but the three of them have different attitudes to books. So one of my daughters is a prolific reader, my other daughters read sometimes, and my son just is not interested in books at all, even when I gave him a copy of my book. And after about 2 weeks he came downstairs and he said, "I'm not going to read your book, Dad." He said, "Books aren't for me, I'm just going to wait until the film comes out." And he was true to his word. And I've spoken to people who think, "Well, how do you feel about that?" I mean, I feel absolutely fine because it's it's my interest and his interests are different, and we talk about different things. But I wondered, you know, obviously your mum would have been delighted as you growing up a reader, and you read to your kids. Did you want to pass on that love to them?
Oh, I definitely wanted to. So my middle one still reads a lot, and he read probably as voraciously as I did when I was young, and still and made the transition to adult. So I'm always quite surprised to find out, say, he's read Clockwork Orange or whatever, you know. The oldest one read a lot when he was a child, doesn't read so much now. Reads politics and articles and stuff, but doesn't really read books. And the wee one, it's a struggle to get him to read. I would like him to, not because you're right, it's your own hobby, isn't it? But at the same time, it's quite good for your language skills and all that to read a lot. And I would like to see him read a bit more, but he knows that.
But I suppose as well, I'm thinking, I know when I was younger, there wasn't the same maybe distractions or other attractions that, especially my son when he was growing up, other things that he would rather have been watching or playing rather than sitting with a book. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, there wasn't a whole load else to do. And if you wanted to escape into another world, there wasn't much else to do, was there, when we were younger? Yeah. Whereas they can escape into different universes through their games, their consoles, and you know, the graphics are so amazing, and it does feel immersive to them, I guess.
Yeah. I always think though that as long as they're in a house of books, then at any given time it's there, and if they want to go and the books are on tap for them, which I always think is just a good environment anyway.
Yes, no, absolutely. Although maybe, I don't know, you could argue it lets them take it for granted, you know, but you're right, they're there if they want them, and hopefully they all will dip in at some point.
Yeah. The second question kind of takes you on in terms of your own life from childhood, and I've kind of called it teenage university, but kind of formative years when you've started, you're becoming an adult and you're kind of developing your own reading tastes, and the book you've chosen is Wild Sargasso Sea.
Wide Sargasso Sea. Yeah, no, it's fine. By Jane Reeves, yeah. So I picked that because I guess, I mean, we didn't call it being woke in those days, but if there was a point where my consciousness of, say, feminism, and also the book's very much about colonialism, was kind of awakened, that would probably be it. It was probably, so Wide Sargasso Sea is about, it takes Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, and looks at it from the perspective of the mad women in the attic. So it's all told from what happened to Antoinette, who later becomes Bertha. And I think that was the first time. So obviously I'd read Jane Eyre, and you know, I don't think I'd ever considered, you buy into the happy ending and oh, that's lovely, they get married in the end, etc. Did I ever give a thought to the idea that somebody had to die? The first wife had to effectively die in order for that to happen. So in Wide Sargasso Sea, it goes back to Jamaica, where Antoinette is born, and it talks about her difficult childhood there, and then she marries Rochester, and he's horrible to her, and he's unfaithful to her, and gradually she goes, well, they would call it mad, but you know, she has mental health difficulties, and she's brought back to England, to Thornfield House, and she's effectively locked in the attic. So for the first time you're seeing that, you know, the eventually happy tale of Jane Eyre is based on someone else's misery, basically. Yeah. And I really liked the idea that, I mean, I'm sure I'd thought about perspective before, but, you know, just the idea that something could be told from an entirely different point of view appealed to me when I was, I don't know what age I was, 16, 17, something like that, yeah.
And also when you're starting to read books like that, and as you say, it's maybe bigger themes, but also themes that you're beginning to become aware of, rather than, I suppose when you're a child, you may be reading things that are more literal, but then you're maybe starting to see beyond that and maybe what the author's trying to say when you read a book like that.
Yes, I guess so. You're looking at the layers. I don't know how aware I would have been of the colonial part of it then, but certainly you see it not as literally. You see the symbolism a bit more and what they're trying to say beyond the plot. Yeah, definitely.
It was interesting. I know a friend of mine had done I'm not sure if it was a higher English or it was certainly some sort of English course, and that was one of the books he studied. So it's a book which maybe lends itself to getting people to delve into the text and find out what's going on in it as well.
And I can't remember if I studied it. I was probably just started university, so I probably was actually studying it. So we probably got help in that, to think about what they were saying about women and also the way the past affects the present and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, because I was wondering that if it had been a book you'd just sort out yourself, or as often as the case, whether you're at high school or university, then you find great books, but it's part of your course almost.
Yeah, I think that probably was. My first year at uni. I don't actually remember 100%, but I think so. Or else somebody else recommended it to me, which is another great way, isn't it? Your friends have discovered something first.
Because I noticed the BBC recently did a list of, I think it was the 100 most inspiring works of literature, and that was in the 100, yeah. Right. And I think the good thing they did about the list is there wasn't any hierarchy. They just listed 100 books, so there wasn't like, these lists, it's like number one, which I always hate.
Yes,
Whereas it was just 100, so you could pick, number 99 was as valid as number one.
It. Yeah.
Which is the best way to. So that kind of.
I know pitting books against each other is not particularly good, is it?
Yeah, I suppose it's like a lot of art, whether it's music or as you say, literature or films. It's such a subjective thing anyway. So how do you decide on the best book of the century and the best book of the decade? I mean, it's.
Yeah, and there's so many different genres, aren't there? And some books are trying to do one thing and some books are trying to do a completely different thing, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, similar to the books you chose from childhood, is that a book that you've come back and read again?
I haven't read it certainly in the last 15 years, so I don't know what I would make of it now.
Well, we're listening to the Read All About It podcast with me, Paul Cuddihy, and my guest today is Dani Garavelli, and we're on to question 3. And again, it's we kind of touched on earlier on about recommending books, and this would be a book that you would recommend to everyone, and it's Jenny Fagan's The Panopticon.
I think I read it quite soon after it came out, immediately fell in love with it, and the thing I fell in love with is the main character, whose voice is just so distinctive, and her name's Anais Hendricks. And she is a teenager, 15 I think, in a care home who has never known her parents. She doesn't even know who her parents were. And the thing about her is she's so simultaneously precocious and difficult and defiant and vulnerable and self-destructive, and she's just, you put the book down and her voice is still in your head for a long time afterwards. Yeah. And
they've just recently, I think there's just been recently a stage adaptation.
Yes, I went to see it. Yes, I did go and see it. Yeah.
How did that match up to your expectations, given the fact you love the book?
It was excellent. It was really good, but I just think if there are books that you love, sometimes there is no matching up to them. I don't think it was any fault of the production. I just think that it can be so firmly lodged in your head, can't it, what that person looks like and what that person sounds like, that that it takes a little bit away from it, I think. But it was very well done production, it was.
I suppose there's always that idea of, is the book better than the film? Mm-hmm. The answer is obviously yes, but there's very few, because I always remember taking one of my daughters to see, is it Jodie Picoult? And she'd written It's My Sister's Keeper, and my daughter loved the book. And then when the film came out, she was absolutely devastated because they changed the ending, and the ending is the real... Right. There's a real twist, and she was only about 15 or 16, she couldn't quite understand, and as a result the film was a disaster because all the fans who'd loved the book felt betrayed. I don't think you should mess with the endings. I mean, I realise that there are things that you can't translate from a book easily to a film, or I don't think you should mess with authors' endings, do you? And do you find yourself recommending a lot of books to friends, or vice versa? Is it one of those things that you read something and you want to say, for example, this book, you should read this, or...
Oh yeah, I swap books all the time. My house is full of books I haven't returned to people. But then again, other people have books they haven't returned to me, so it's fair enough. I think, and as I said, I think social media has helped that a lot. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon going on and recommending what her books are, I just think that's got the chat going, and people... I suppose it depends who you follow in it, but in my wee circle, we talk about books a lot. So I love to hear other people's excitement over something that they've just read as well.
I suppose that's the good thing about Twitter, for example, is you can actually frame almost the conversation that you want to hear. So, for example, if it is just book chat, you can kind of cut out the other stuff, the white noise of all the negativity, if you just want to have people that are kind of passionate about literature, for example.
Yeah. Well, because I need it for work, I have to pretty much have... But yes, you can have your wee circle, definitely, of people who love the same things as you, definitely. Yeah. And
I'd asked you, right at the start, about whether you thought about writing fiction. But do you think sometimes, obviously, what you deal with is facts, non-fiction, but sometimes can fiction almost tell the story? For example, that book could be told maybe as a non-fiction, but fiction can sometimes work as well in telling the story of something harrowing. But in a way that engages people.
Oh yes, definitely, and I suppose that creates a distance as well from the story, doesn't it? By fictionalising it, which makes it more acceptable to tell the story, and also sometimes you don't know every aspect of the story, so you would, to tell it at all, it would need to be fictionalised.
I mean, what kind of a reader are you? Do you have a specific? Are you quite open in terms of you'll just read anything, or is there certain things that you would read or wouldn't read in terms of genre or anything like that?
I'm relatively open, I think. I'm limited a little bit because I review a lot, so a lot of my reading time's taken up with what people have asked me to review, so I sometimes find myself reviewing things that I probably wouldn't have read otherwise, and sometimes that can be, you think, oh, I could be reading something else, but at the same time, sometimes that opens you up to something you might not have picked up naturally off the shelf and thought that would be for me, and you find that it is really, really good and you've enjoyed it, so maybe it widens your horizons a little bit as well.
Yeah. Is that a pressure when you're reviewing, because obviously there's an author sitting there somewhere waiting for your review, or do you just have to be honest in terms of how it makes you feel?
Is that a pressure? Yeah, I mean, I have never been in a position where I've hated a book so much I couldn't find anything good to say about it, so luckily so far. So I don't know what I would do. Yeah, no, it is really, isn't it? I don't know what I would do if I did. No, I think you would. I think you do have to be honest. I don't think there's any point in reviewing if you're not going to be. Yeah. I think you just have to try not to think too much about the other person at the end. But
and is it fiction or non-fiction you review, or a mixture of both? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have a preference in terms of?
In terms of reviewing?
Yeah.
No, whatever is out there. Yeah. And I don't have a preference in reading either. You know.
Takes us nicely on to question 4, which is one that the book that you couldn't be paid to read again.
Well, unless I'm reviewing, I don't tend to read all the way through something that I didn't like. I would probably just leave it on the basis that life's too short and there are too many books to spend time forcing yourself. But I did, because you've asked me, I think that, and this is really unfair because again I was really young when I read this, so probably it's an absolute work of genius, but I read The Old Man in the Sea, Hemingway's The Old Man in the Sea, when I was very young, and I thought it was, and I like other Hemingway books, but it basically was an old man and the sea for the entire book, his battle with a marlin. And yes, I think if you ask me what kind of books do I not really like, it's probably man pitting himself against the elements. Yeah. And I learned that quite early on.
I find Hemingway a bit of a struggle. Anytime I've tried reading it, I get bogged down. It was interesting that, you know, that way I think readers fall into two camps. I'm kind of like you. If I'm reading a book and I don't enjoy it, I just put it away and find something I do enjoy, because there's so many books there and life's too short. But other people will stick it out to the bitter end and maybe not enjoy it anymore, but almost like a sense of achievement of having conquered this horrible experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do have some kind of admiration for that. I just think that probably I only want to read now for pleasure and because there are so many books out there. But of course, that could be my loss, because sometimes you could persevere and find that it was worth the journey in the end. Yeah.
Because I sometimes find it sometimes depends on your mood, depending on the book you're reading. Or so even if I don't take it first time, I'll maybe go back again, try 2 or 3 times, and then if it's still the same reaction, then that's finished. That's me.
Yeah, and like you said earlier on about recommendations, if somebody whose views or opinions I really respected said, honestly, you will like this, or think about it like that, you know, from a different perspective, then I would go and try again, definitely, you know. Yeah,
I mean, that's what I like about this question, is the fact that some people take it with relish and have a whole list of books, and then other people it is quite difficult. Partly maybe for the same reasons you were saying about you don't finish a book. When I'm asking the question, there's always, you know, that wee split second before you answer, I'm thinking, I hope it's not a book I really love, because I'm thinking to admit
it's my favourite ever. You've just
the podcast is over.
Out. No, yeah, and the other person who's my mum's still a voracious reader, and she's unfortunately now, and she's bought a Kindle. So what used to happen was she would buy all the books and then she would give them to me to read, but now she can't because she's got this Kindle. But she still tells me things that she loves, and she'll probably reads 4 books a week. You know,
right, that's incredible.
So anything that's on the Booker Prize long list she'll have read, and so, you know, I have this very immediate person to bat backwards and forwards to.
Yeah, that's quite nice actually as well.
It's lovely.
And again, it takes us seamlessly. People will think we've actually prepared this. On the fifth one, the book that you've read or currently reading, and it's a previous Booker Prize winner, and Wright's The Gathering.
Yes, it is. And I for some reason, I've owned that for a long time and not read it, and it's been on my shelves. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was reading an essay that Anne Wright had written for The Guardian, which was about Trump and Me Too and feminism. And I just thought, this is such an amazing piece, and I knew I owned the book, so I thought I'll dip in and see what the book's like. So, and I really love it. I'm not quite finished it yet, but I'm really, really enjoying it. I think I've got about 20 pages left to read.
Because I'm doing a sort of reading project just now. I've decided to try and read all the Booker Prize winners, starting from the very first one and working my way through. I mean, it's going to take me a while, and then I'm not doing it. So I'm doing it chronologically, but then I maybe go and read something else completely different, like a book about football or music or something, just to give me a break and then go back to it. So at some point, I will get to, because I've read a few of them, but not.
So how many have you done so far?
I'm only on number 4. It's only something, it was just in the back of the prize recently in 2019 that I thought I'll start, so I went right back to the very beginning. So I'm on to book number 4. So it's already interesting, the different reactions. Some, even already in the first 3, some I've enjoyed better than others. So.
What an interesting thing to do, yeah.
So whether there's a book or and trying to keep me notes and like wee reviews of them also.
I wonder if you'll find there's something consistent, in how they're chosen, or whether, I suppose it depends. The judges will vary from year to year.
The thing is as well, I was thinking, so I think the first one was 1969, so it's like 50 years, so tastes, language, subject matter, everything will have changed from then. Certainly I look forward to The Gathering when it comes, yeah. Yeah,
I'm sure you'll like. I mean, it's about a big, sprawling Irish family, and if I tell you the actual plot, it sounds almost derivative, because I suppose there's lots of books about big, sprawling Irish families, and the thing that is the crux of it is one of the brothers has just died and he's an alcoholic, and it thrusts one of the sisters into a state of crisis and a state of reflection in her life. But it's the writing, it's the way she merges her memories with stuff you're not sure whether is real memory, and just the trauma of it. And I love this idea. She's got so many brothers and sisters, and they were so close together that sometimes she can't remember what things happened to her and what were her memories are merged with what happened to the brother or sister that was nearest to her, etc. And the writing's just phenomenal. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it when you get there.
I mean, when you're obviously reading that book, but do you have a pile of books that you're going to work your way through, or is it just one comes, just will spring to mind, or have you got a list or a pile that you have to work your way through?
I have a kind of mental list, but I do tend to get diverted by something I've read somewhere else, and I think, like in an article like this Anne Wright thing, and I suddenly think, I have to read that. I'm wanting to read some more Janet Malcolm stuff at the moment, because I not long ago read Iphigenia in Forest Hills and loved that so much, so that's kind of in the back of my mind. When I get time, I'll settle down and read some of that. Yeah,
because some people, I found that sometimes with people, you'll find one book by someone that you really like, and then you kind of feel you need to go and read everything else again. Is that something that you find yourself doing, that you want to read their full body of work?
Yeah, sometimes, and this particularly because it's a genre that I am really interested in, which is kind of literary real crime, but not, I don't like potboiler stuff. I like, like Gordon Burns or obviously Truman Capote, and I hadn't really read any of hers. Who else writes that stuff that I really love? Oh, and Gita Sereni. So and I hadn't really discovered Janet Malcolm's before, so that's just kind of one of the things that I really, really like. I was a crime reporter in a different life, so I'm quite into psychology of crime and all that, and court cases and things like that. Because
it's such a big, so popular as well, crime novel, but it spans such a different. So many different styles within that.
Yes, actually, I'm not that interested in crime novels. I really like the things that are very literary tellings of big cases. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you mentioned the fact that your mum now reads on a Kindle. Where do you stand on the Kindle in the e-book?
I don't have a, apart from the fact that it stops her giving me books, I don't have a kind of issue with it. Just for me personally, I like to physically hold a book, and maybe if I tried with a Kindle, I would. Well, the one time I think it would really help would be when you go on holiday, because we all take books on holiday, and when we're all there, you're carrying masses of books.
It would help your luggage along.
It would help the luggage. But beyond that, I just really physically like being able to cart the book around. I also like, I mean, I'm one of these weird people that will read while cooking and read while while in the bath and all those places that Kindles are not that, you know.
Can you read while you're walking?
I don't do that anymore, but I did that as a child. I read.
See, that really impresses me, because I always think, there's no way I could do that.
Really? I saw somebody do it the other day and I hadn't seen anyone do it for a really long time, and I thought maybe I could try doing that again. But I think you probably would get quite odd looks, don't you?
Because I always think it's intriguing now, you know, if you get public transport, the train or the bus, if you get a book and take a book out of your bag, you will probably be the only person on that carriage. Everybody else is on their phone, which is just the way of the world as well now, that a lot of them might be reading books on their phone. I doubt it, but
they might be reading articles and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite nice when you actually see somebody physically. Because I think as well, Kindles, that was meant to herald the death of the physical books, actually had the opposite effect. It's encouraged people to read again, and then eventually people then return to books, because as a physical product, as a gift or as something to have and to hold, it's just so much better than this reader. Even though you can hold 1,000 books in the palm of your hand, you still rather hold.
I mean, maybe there's a parallel with the return to vinyl, you know. It's great being able to listen to whatever you want and stream it and everything, but there's something beautiful about the actual artefact, isn't there, and holding that and it being a thing that you've chosen out and own, I think. Yeah.
So given, you know, there's certain books that you've had or you have that you treasure, that means something to you, you'll not even loan them out to anybody, you just keep them because...
I would loan most of my books out, I think, but I certainly have ones that I treasure, definitely. I've got, I've talked about this before, but I have a 1985 copy of Lanark.
Oh, wow.
Which Alistair Gray signed when I was 17, and it is falling apart, actually. I wouldn't lend that simply because every time I open it, a few more pages kind of get separated from the spine, so I probably wouldn't loan that to anybody. But other things that the more I treasure it, the more I want other people to read it as well. So I don't think I would say that I hoard them to myself or anything. But
I mean, I take it you're a fan of Lanark.
Oh, I love Lanark, yeah. Although I think as I've grown older, I've probably got more issues with it. It's more, again, that whole feminist thing. You'll read it from a different kind of light later on, but because I loved it when I was young, I think I'll always love it.
Yeah, because it's always one of my bugbears when going to school, high school, we get very little Scottish literature. It's only later you come to it, and it's things like that, the Cone Gatherers, various other books that you think, why weren't we taught that when we were at school?
I think it's different now, though. They are definitely getting stuff on the set texts that are Scottish, but yeah, no, you're right, we didn't really get very much at all. It was quite a lot of American literature when I was young. Well,
listen, Dani, thanks very much for joining us on the Read All About It podcast.
It's been a pleasure, it's been lovely.
And I hope if your mum's listening to this, she starts buying books again, so she can pass them on to you.
I'll tell her you said that.
But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Read All About It podcast, and I'd love to hear what you thought about it. You can get in touch via Twitter at ReadAllAbout20, on Instagram at ReadAllAboutIt podcast, or you can send an email to readallaboutit@paulcuddihy.com. If you've enjoyed the podcast, subscribe, leave a review and spread the word. If you haven't enjoyed it, say nothing to anybody. But I do hope you can join me, Paul Cuddihy, next time on the Read All About It podcast. And in the meantime, keep reading.